Welcome back. We're going to get into the second part of the chapter, which is the majority of the chapter, actually. And so now we're going to be talking about our body defenses. So we first talked about the structures of the lymphatic system, and lymphatic system and immunity go hand in hand because our immune system cells, the immune system is actually a group of cells that protect our body from specific diseases. And so immunity is the protection from specific diseases. There are two basic mechanisms that help to defend us from foreign invaders. The first is our innate defense, and that's things that we are born with. And then we have our adaptive defense, or our immune system. So our innate defenses make up both the first and second lines of defense. Things like our skin, our mucous membranes, sweat that is produced by the skin, producing an acid mantle, sebaceous secretions that keep water, or not water, that keep oxygen from getting to bacteria. Our second line of defense, if a pathogen gets into the body, then we have a bunch of different cells that are going to start become active and try and kill those pathogens. We also have certain proteins that increase our ability to kill off pathogens or decrease a pathogen's ability to replicate. In the third line of defense, then, that is our immune system. We have lymphocytes, and these lymphocytes, either B and T lymphocytes, so either B or T or both, are going to attack the pathogen head on. They are going to build an army of themselves that can wipe out the entire pathogen group. So the innate defense is a mechanism to protect against many different invaders. The response is going to always be the same, and so it doesn't matter if a cold virus gets into your system or the Ebola virus gets into the system. Our innate defenses will respond exactly the same. They're going to try and get rid of the pathogen in the same way every single time. Whereas our adaptive defense fights off an invader that is very specific. So it only recognizes one type of invader. And so it will provide immunity to that invader. And so in that case, if you had a cold virus and you had the Ebola virus, depending on which pathogen activated your immune system, you're going to produce an army against that one pathogen. Then you're probably going to start producing an army against the second pathogen too, depending on which one came there first. But the armies can't attack the other's pathogen. They will only attack their own. They're specific. So let's look at the innate defenses a little closer. And if you look at table 12.1, which I believe is in your PowerPoint as well as in the book, you can see the different mechanisms in that table for your innate defenses. So the first line of defense then is going to be the skin itself. It is a barrier. And then on the skin, we have an acid mantle. Acid mantle is produced by the sweat that is released from our skin on a daily basis. So we release sweat, a lot of sweat, when we are hot, but we also release fluids through our skin even when we're not hot, and that those fluids are released via transpiration, and that helps to produce that acid mantle. Sebum is the oily secretions. Sebum has certain enzymes that can be toxic to bacteria. Sebum also can keep oxygen from getting to the bacteria. So if bacteria replicate or can grow better in an oxygenic environment, they're not going to be able to grow as effectively. We have mucus then, which is part of the first line of defense. Mucus is found within that mucous membrane, and mucous membranes are found anywhere that we have an opening to the internal or to the inside of the body that also has an external opening. So like the mouth, the nasal cavity, the vaginal cavity, the anal cavity, those all have openings to the external environment. So they all have mucous membranes that help to trap microbes. They have cilia that will beat those microbes towards the opening so we can get rid of them, expel them. In our stomach, we have gastric juice. This is also part of the first line of defense. So the stomach still has an opening to the external environment because it's just a tube. And so gastric juice is very acidic and it can kill the majority of all pathogens. If you have a pathogen that grows well in acidic environments, or if you have a pathogen that has a special capsule surrounding it that protects it, then they might be able to make it through. And then we have saliva and tears that contain enzymes that also can help in destroying pathogens. Our second line of defense then, if the pathogen gets through the primary line of defense, then the second line of defense is going to immediately respond. So second line of defense includes natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte, but they are a nonspecific defender. We have phagocytes. We have both white and we have both, not white, I'm sorry. We have white blood cell phagocytes, both neutrophils and macrophages are the major phagocytes, but eosinophils will also phagocytize material, and even B lymphocytes can phagocytize. We have chemicals that activate an inflammatory response, chemicals that activate complement system, and we have fever. So we're going to look at all of these now. So natural killer cells function by looking for any cells, any body cells that have unusual cell receptor proteins. So if you have a cell that has been infected with a virus, or if you have a cancer cell, then the surface of that cell is going to have different proteins on it than your normal body cells. And natural killer cells will recognize that difference and they will attack. And when they attack, they secrete chemicals called interferons that help to break down the cell itself. Granzymes then break or get in, the interferons open up the cell, and then the granzymes get in and they cause the cell to undergo apoptosis. Inflammatory response occurs when cells are damaged. So if our body cells have damage, then you're going to immediately release chemical stimuli that cause inflammation. And so there are different cytokines that are released that can activate the inflammatory response. And there are different types of cells that release these same chemicals. So think of your basophils and eosinophils. These both can release different chemicals that cause the inflammatory response due to the damage to a body tissue region. And the idea behind inflammation is to keep any potential pathogens at that site so that then your white blood cells can come and they can fight off the infection. So there are 4 cardinal signs to inflammation: redness, heat, pain, and swelling. And then a 5th one that sometimes is talked about is immobility. So here we have a picture or a figure from your textbook, something caused injury to your cells. So in this case, you had a broken glass and you cut yourself. So there's cell damage. The cell itself releases chemicals. These chemicals stimulate neutrophils and monocytes, which will move to that area. These are your phagocytic cells that are going to remove tissue, damaged tissue, and any potential pathogens. This also stimulates capillaries to become more leaky, which allows these white blood cells to move easier to the area. And we have dilation of the blood vessels, which again allows for faster movement of to the area. So when you remove damaged tissue and pathogens, this is going to promote the healing, which is what we want. When capillaries become leaky, more fluid fills in that space. Also, you're going to have more clotting proteins entering that area. That fluid moving into the area causes edema. And edema is swelling of that area due to excess fluid. Edema can also lead to pain because you're putting pressure on the nerves that are in that area, and that sends signals of pain. Swelling and pain can lead to joint immobility depending on where it is that this occurs. And when you can't move your joint, you rest your joint, you're more likely to heal that joint. When blood vessels dilate, you have more blood flow to that area. When blood flows faster to an area, this provides the redness that we are associating with inflammatory response, and heat, which are two of the other cardinal signs. This also, when you have more blood flowing, then you have more oxygen and nutrients, which are going to promote healing because you have an increased metabolic rate for your cells. So damaged cells release histamines and certain types of cytokines. These chemicals cause capillaries to become leaky, blood vessels to dilate, and phagocytes to move to the area. This prevents damaging agents getting out of that area and spreading through the body, and it sets the stage for repair. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. I believe it shows this. So here are the steps that you're looking at, which were written on the slide before. Here we have damage to our cells. So in this case, we have a nail that has embedded in our skin. That would really hurt. This is going to release chemicals that increase blood flow and make your capillaries much more leaky. So white blood cells, neutrophils are examples. Neutrophils are the first responders to almost every type of pathogen. They flow to the area. This is known as positive chemotaxis. They move through the capillary bed to that tissue area. This is when you move across the capillary bed like this. This is known as diapedesis. And then they start to fight off any infection by, in this case, they are phagocytizing bacteria that got in. They would also phagocytize any potential damaged tissue. And then macrophages would be following right on their boots to get to the next area. So phagocytes, when they get to the area, they engulf foreign materia via phagocytosis. And then the phagocytic cell or vesicle fuses with lysosomes within the white blood cell, and the lysosomes then digest the cell's contents, and then those materials can be recognized on the surface of that white blood cell. And again, this is the picture from earlier that I showed, a macrophage engulfing multiple bacteria. And so this is what it would look like. Here we have some pathogen. The pathogen is being engulfed by the plasma membrane and brought in. And hold on a second, let me just show you one step at a time. Phagocyte engulfs the pathogen, and the pathogen is brought in. So now we have this vesicle called a phagosome that's going to bind with a lysosome. So here's that lysosome. Lysosome and the phagosome bind together. The lysosome releases its enzymes into the phagosome, and the phagosome with the enzymes breaks down, or the bacteria within there break down due to those enzymes. And then we can get rid of the debris via exocytosis, or we can take a portion of the material, the protein, and we can present it on the surface of the cell to allow other cells to recognize, hey, there's some type of pathogen in our system. There are different proteins that help the innate defense mechanisms. The two groups of proteins that I typically talk about are complement proteins and interferon. Complement proteins are proteins produced by our liver. They typically are found in our body, in our blood plasma, inactive, but when they come in contact with certain pathogens, then they become activated. And then interferon can be produced by pretty much all of our body cells when they get infected with a virus. So the term complement refers to a group of proteins. There's about 20 of them that are inactive, and they just circulate in our blood plasma. When they become activated, then they cause a cascade effect that leads to a series of different outcomes that will protect our body. One of those outcomes is known as the MAC attack. So when they get activated, a group of proteins comes together and causes a hole to be put into the pathogen, and that hole then allows water and other materials to enter, and then the cell will break apart. And so here you can see that MAC attack. It's known as a membrane attack complex. So you have multiple proteins that form a pore, and then fluid can move in, which causes the cell itself to lysis open. Interferons are proteins secreted by cells that are infected with viruses, and when they get infected, they produce the interferon to save neighboring cells. So they are basically going to die, but they will save their neighbors in the process. So here we have my version of this. So these are all body cells. This is a natural killer cell. These are macrophages, the virus, interferon, and viral protection. So first thing that happens, here we go, we get viruses entering the cell, and then they replicate. So that virus cell is going to secrete interferon, and you can see interferon is going to move to all the neighboring cells. I just put it on 2, but it would move to all the neighboring cells, and I thought I had put it on more. And this is going to stop virus replication. So the virus will kill these cells possibly, but the viruses can't get in and take over the cell's machinery in these neighboring cells. So here comes natural killer cells. Natural killer cells secrete chemicals that activate apoptosis inside of these cells. So they're going to Interferons and granzymes that are going to cause the cells to undergo apoptosis. And then macrophages come and they're going to eat the materials. I knew I had put those on all of the cells. It was a little bit slow in the way it came out, but the idea is still there. All right, I'm going to actually stop here because this has been a 19-minute video. So I will pick up on the fever in the next video. Bye.